Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV. Roxella TV.
You talked about earlier your love of language and poetry, and you can really hear that in the cadences, and obviously Chuck Berry was a big influence, but
True.
the books you would read too. But can you pinpoint a few Beach Boy lyrics that might be lesser known that you're really proud of the lyric and how it's expressed and how and what it evokes?
Well, now that depends on what you're talking about evoking. It's hard to say. It's such a broad question. Do you have any song in mind, or?
I think Add Some Music is really interesting. I love something like Airplane too.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Airplane as well.
Well, there's so many. How many songs have we done? 300 or 400? Yeah, I don't know. You know, I like All This Is That a lot, and you know, I think one of the better songs that Brian ever recorded that he wrote himself was Till I Die. It's an amazing, amazing song. I mean, it really is being in touch with, you know, your mortality, your humanity, the vulnerability of life. It really, really says it.
As a spectator, what's the greatest rock and roll show you've ever seen? As a spectator.
Not
you performing, but a show that you saw.
one of the best, I'd have to say, was James Brown and the Famous Flames at the old Madison Square Garden in New York when it was made out of wood. Like they used to have the Boston Garden out of wood in the Madison Square Garden. It's before they built the concrete and rebar monstrosities that exist nowadays. But I and maybe, you know, maybe half a dozen other white people went to see this show, and it blew my mind. He was so great. It was when he was doing the splits and the cape, and oh, there was just what an entertainer. The godfather of soul. Oh yeah, he was.
Well, you spoke about your love of the environment, and this year marks the 40th anniversary of Dennis Wilson's Pacific Ocean Blue, and you wrote the title track for that.
Yes, I wrote the words. He asked me to do the words for it.
Yeah. What was the reaction among the Beach Boy community and the members themselves? Were you surprised that Dennis was able to create such a beautiful, affecting record?
Not really. He was very deep in his, you know, unfortunately his lifestyle choices took him in a detrimental direction. But no, he was as deep as anybody. In fact, the funny story is, you know, we talk about learning meditation. They're doing 10,000 years ago right now.
Cool.
Yeah. We met Maharishi in December '67 during UNICEF Children's Emergency Fund show, and that was great. And then we went the next day to London, and Dennis called. He stayed back in Paris. He says, "You got to come back to Paris." I said, "Why? I like London." He said, "Because Maharishi's going to teach us to meditate." I said, "Are you sure?" He says, "I'll find out." And he called back again about an hour later. Said, "Yeah, it's set for tomorrow afternoon." You know, which this was a Saturday, and so we got up early the next morning and flew back to Paris. It was kind of funny because we got into a taxi cab from the airport, and the guy said, "Have you ever been to Paris before?" And we said, "Yeah." "When?" "Yesterday." But Dennis made that call to have us come and learn meditate, and so we all learned together. Even when he was drinking, he'd say, "Mike, let's get together and meditate." So
I understand you went, even near the end of his life, you helped him, you went down.
well, we tried, yeah. But he would go into rehab for like a night and then leave. So, you know.
The title track of the record is really interesting because on the surface, if people don't listen to what the lyrics are, they think, you know, you're celebrating the joys of being in the ocean and things like that, but it's Pacific Ocean Blue.
Yeah.
Talk a bit about the dual meaning of that song. It's very interesting.
Well, the Pacific Ocean Blue is sad that there's so much, you know, inhumanity, towards the environment, towards, you know, like they trap dolphins and slaughter them by the hundreds of thousands and stuff. It's messed up. So You know, so, and also just the ocean is imperiled just by human waste, and like there are areas where there's underground canyons full of plastics and stuff like that. And it's not good for the animals that live there. So, you know, it's a sad situation. It's got to be rectified.
And that was on your mind even back then, which is
Oh,
why you
yeah.
wrote the song.
Absolutely. It's always been on my mind.
Well, you've had so many high moments with the Beach Boys, and so many moments that probably bring you great joy thinking about it. But if you could go back hypothetically for one day, we could put you in that time machine, and you could relive one of those moments and carry that with you again. What would you want to relive?
With the Beach Boys?
Yeah, what would you want to relive? If you could relive a really high moment for a day, you could be back in there and you could carry that with you.
There are many great moments. I mean, you'd have to distinguish between,
Let's pick the 60s.
well,
Let's pick the 60s, yeah.
well, I think listening back to the words that I wrote on the way to the studio, that I handed to Brian, who handed them to Carl, and sang the words that I'd written just moments before on the way to the studio for Good Vibrations was pretty special. Hearing Good Vibrations back for the first time with Carl singing the lead. I came up with the chorus and all the lyrics and stuff, and Brian did the brilliant track. That was pretty special. But when it went to #1 in England, we were voted the #1 group in England, and #2 the Beatles. That was special too. So, but you know, so many concerts are on a level that's unbelievable, because our music creates so much happiness and joy and positivity in people's lives. You know, there's all kinds of stuff you could talk about that. The yellow journalism, they call it. People focus on the idiosyncrasies or the missteps of a person, or invent things even that don't exist. And that's too bad, because they're missing the point of the whole process of making music, which is to create harmony and positivity and show some love. At the core of all our music is love, because that's how it started. It wasn't for money or fame or anything like that. It was all about getting together and harmonizing, blending, and sublimating your personal sound in favor of creating a group sound. And so, anyway, so there have been many, many great things. July 4th, Washington, D.C., in afternoon in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Inquirer said 900,000 people were in the streets of Philadelphia, and the economic impact was $22 million to the city. And that was back in the 80s, when $22 million might have meant something.
I was at that show, and it was
Really?
a very one-off show, because not only was Jimmy Page on stage, but Mr. T was on stage as
In
well.
Philly?
I was at that show.
I remember Mr. T going to Philly, the train was hot, and he kicked the window out. Yeah. Yeah. Jimmy Page, though, that was like a Martian landed on our stage. That was amazing, wasn't it? He was just, that was unbelievable. What an incredible guitar player that
And
guy
you did
is.
2 shows in it. You did the
Yeah, afternoon in
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, evening in D.C. So we played for over 1.5 million people in one day, which is pretty awesome.
Well, The Who are one of the biggest rock bands of all time. And ironically, The Who's drummer, Keith Moon, was the #1 Beach Boy fan.
He was.
Said he would have left.
He wrote us a letter saying he wanted to be our drummer. Well, we had Dennis Wilson. So what are you going to do? He's the brother.
What
And
are
a
your memories
cousin.
of hanging out with him? And he jammed with
I
you.
didn't hang out with him so much, but Bruce did. He when he went to England, Keith Moon hooked him up with John and Paul to play the Pet Sounds acetate that Bruce brought with him, and that got their ear, and they got busy to do another album.
Rock Salad TV. 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 Rock Salad TV.